This is the second module in the training series Leading with Emotional Intelligence, titled Improving Perception Competencies. Recognizing which perception competencies need improvement and recommend techniques for cultivating them is the objective for this module. Let's begin the process. Have you ever went to work and found an upset, angry, or worried employee? Did you know what to say or to do? Perceptive leaders can tune into what employees feel and help them regain self-control when personal problems come into the workplace. Would you like to be that kind of perceptive leader? Exploring this topic, you'll learn positive techniques to help improve the emotional intelligence, or EQ, you require as a leader. This topic covers the two EQ domains associated with perception. It includes the techniques needed to improve your competencies in self-perception and social perception. Consider the types of problems that exist in your own workplace. How do you think perception influences these problems? Take a moment and reflect on the problems which exist in your workplace and how perception influences them. Pause the training at this point to record your answers. Once you've completed, resume the training. Having self-perception means you can read yourself and you have self-confidence. It means you're aware of your emotions and capabilities. When you can read yourself, you know what you do well and what your limits are. You're open to what your feelings are trying to tell you. Certain characteristics and behaviors are indicators of poor self-awareness. Projecting emotions is a defense mechanism. Unacceptable thoughts or feelings about repressed and then attributed to someone else, like when someone is in denial about their own anger, feels that he's encountered a lot of angry people. Associating emotions with memories or unpleasant emotions can occur if someone's behavior subconsciously reminds you of something else. For example, a coworker's tone of voice may trigger a childhood memory of a parental punishment. Believing you should feel a different way than you do can trigger difficult emotions. Sometimes people think they're bad for feeling emotions they've been brought up to believe are wrong. Refusing to acknowledge feelings or denying them happens for certain feelings or thoughts to be unacceptable or simply not acknowledged. For example, a CEO in a family business may refuse to acknowledge that the firm's financial troubles are due to his son's inability to control the budget. Blaming others for your feelings can occur when you don't take responsibility for your own emotions and actions. For instance, someone might make an excuse for a project's failure by blaming the economy and not accepting the impact of her own decisions. Characteristics and behaviors may be indicators of poor self-awareness, but the converse is also true. When you have good self-awareness and can read yourself, you know that your emotions can affect your work and those you work with. For example, if you're tense, your coworkers and your customers can pick up on it. Knowing this, you can project a positive attitude, which is always contagious. A company is an industry that's rapidly conglomerating. The owner, who is distrustful of conglomerates, say he doesn't want to sell his business because he wants his son to succeed him. He uses the reason to justify his past decisions to avoid growing larger through acquisitions. Although some emotions hinder self-awareness, you can use many techniques to improve your ability to read yourself. You can learn to solicit feedback from multiple sources, identify your strengths, weaknesses, and emotional triggers, interpret your goals and feelings, self-observe as if you were viewing from another person's emotions, and record your reactions and thoughts. When one solicits feedback, they ask for feedback from people in their life. The 360-degree feedback technique in many companies make use of this idea. Customer, peers, subordinates, and supervisors can all provide valuable feedback. Getting multiple views gives you a more complete picture. For example, you could do a regular lessons learned reflection on every project and solicit feedback from all project stakeholders. Be sure to listen without getting defensive. Identify strengths, weaknesses, and triggers. Only when you identify your strengths and weaknesses, you'll be able to take stock of your real self. A personal balance sheet, for example, can help you inventory your talents and passions. Then you can examine your strengths and gaps. You also need to identify your emotional triggers, which are situations or personalities that provoke an intense emotional response. For instance, if micromanagement makes you angry, you should investigate it. And once you identify it's a trigger, you can stop responding emotionally. Instead, respond with intelligence and rationality. Interpret goals and feelings is not enough to just identify your emotions. You must also interpret them and your goals. For instance, you could visualize where you'll be in 10 years and interpret this by determining what's it say about you, what's important to you. And when experience emotions, ask, what is this feeling trying to tell me? For an example, an HR manager faced with a big hiring challenge worried about it for months beforehand. After he interpreted the worry as fear for his own job, he was able to estimate the probability of his fears coming true and start focusing on his realistic options. Self-observe. Self-observation is enhanced by visualizing yourself as if you were observing someone else. Self-observation and self-curiosity will allow you to tune into yourself and identify even your more subtle moods. For instance, a supervisor observes herself and learns she always reacts poorly to people she perceives as being arrogant. She can then design a plan to improve in that area instead of being emotionally hijacked each time she has to deal with that type of person. Record reactions and thoughts. Recording your own reactions and thoughts in an emotional journal gives you a detachment. Just a few minutes a day can help you understand what makes you incapable with certain people or jobs and learning to deal with it. Understanding the true meaning in your writing may take several weeks. For example, a manager didn't organize his writing, but let the words flow. At the end of the month, he looked back at his journal, and he clearly identified the specific feelings that caused him stress. He then learned ways to counteract them. Once you have the ability to read yourself, what's next? Well, you also need to become socially perceptive. Then you need to understand and empathize with others and their emotions and accurately read even potentially volatile situations and people. The first competency in social perception domain is empathizing. Without empathy, you expect others to act and perceive as you do. But everyone sees the world in different ways, and people act based on their personal map. If you assume everyone has the same map as you, their actions might not make sense. But if you empathize, you can find a road to travel together. Empathizing with others helps you understand what motivates them so that you can better align their goals with organizational goals, provide constructive feedback, and help solve problems. Whenever you deal with another person, ask yourself, what's this person dealing with right now? What do they want or need from this interaction? What are they feeling? Asking these questions will help you empathize. The following example illustrates what can happen when a leader doesn't have empathy. Whenever production numbers decline in a utility company, one executive routinely snapped pencils in half and shouted at individuals in production meetings. He was angry and frustrated, but he didn't stop to put himself in the shoes of other team members. With each of the outbursts, the room fell into silence. Employees called the meeting room the torture chamber. If the utility company executive had shown an appropriate awareness of others' perspectives, he might have been able to express his frustration constructively. His emotional energy could have sparked a creative brainstorming and troubleshooting session instead of shutting the whole conversation down. Consider colleagues and leaders in your work area or department who are empathetic. How do they behave? Techniques that can improve your skills at feeling empathy for other people are to listen first, stand in their shoes, and find common ground. Listen first. A real conversation doesn't consist of just taking turns talking. For empathetic listening, you need to hear the other person's side of the story and really listen without interrupting or getting defensive. Focus on the words and the body language without judging the person. Every now and then, take the opportunity to summarize what the person thinks, feels, and needs. This will demonstrate that you've really heard him. Stand in their shoes. Create empathy and understanding by trying to stand in someone else's shoes for a while. Write down what you know about the person's interest, background, and situation. Write in the first person as though you are the person. After such an exercise, you will have more understanding and empathy and more positive interactions. Find common ground. When you search for common ground, focus on the characteristics in someone that are the same as yours and that are positive. This helps raise your awareness of what the other person is feeling. You can turn it into a kind of a game to always find something you and the other person share. You should be truthful, but agree with what the other person says when you can. This will clearly demonstrate your common ground. The second competency in social perception domain is reading the big picture. An accurate high-level view allows you, as a leader, to better address conflict and other problems among employees. It also helps you cultivate positive relationships and detect key power relationships and networks. Then you'll be able to understand the political forces, the guiding values, and the unspoken rules that operate in your organization. A lack of organizational awareness has consequences. As one software company found, the production manager chose creative developers to work on a new software offering, but the manager couldn't read the group's emotional currents and power relationships. As a result, subcommittees always became mirrored in squabbles, and the project failed. If the manager had been stronger in his organizational awareness, he could have used the competitiveness in the group to spur each subcommittee on. A manager in a publishing company remembers what it's like to work long hours to meet deadlines, so she sets up reasonable milestones for employees. However, her teams delay their work and set up emergency situations. They then work to meet deadlines. The company considers these efforts heroic and always rewards them. This has become an organizational norm, and team members know that to succeed, you have to narrowly avoid a crisis. The manager is frustrated and tries to set up even more reasonable deadlines. Specific techniques for enhancing your awareness of the big picture include tracking emotions during meetings and analyzing the organizational culture. To track emotions during meetings, check your understanding of what coworkers are communicating by stating in your own words what you think they're feeling when they're making a statement. You might do this 2 or 3 times during each meeting. To analyze the organizational culture, you uncover written and unwritten rules, as well as determine which actions are rewarded and how mistakes are handled. You must also ascertain goals and missions and interpret benefits and other organizational gestures for the values they represent. You can assess the company culture by asking yourself certain questions. Do I fully understand the organizational structure? Can I accomplish things both formally and informally? Do I know who the key decision makers are? Can I recognize who influences whom and who seeks advice from whom? Do I know who has worked together and for how long? As a leader, you can share the techniques that improve your own EQ with your employees. Then they can enhance their EQ too. This allows the positive efforts of high EQ to trickle down from your level to the front line. This activity gives you an opportunity to assess your perception competencies and to identify ways you can improve your self-perception and social perception. Take a few moments to complete the attached Improving Your Perception Assessment activity. This is the end of Module 2 in the series Leading with Emotional Intelligence. At this point, you should have already completed Module 1, Introduction to Emotional Intelligence, this module, Improving Perception Competencies, and the next module in this series is Using Self-Management and Social Skills. In addition, make sure you're completing each accompanying learning packet for each of the modules.